Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a time when looking pale wasn't just a trend. It was practically a full-time job, and sometimes a death sentence. Imagine waking up in a cold stone room with no central heating, grabbing a chunk of toxic white paste and smearing it all over your face like it's a spa day. Welcome to the world of medieval beauty, where being fashionably ghost-like meant you were doing something right, even if it was slowly poisoning you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and the current time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a lady of means in 14th century France. You own a mirror, a rare thing, and more importantly, you have access to something far more powerful, Venetian cerus. It sounds luxurious, right? Venetian cerus has that upscale Instagram skincare brand energy. But here's the catch. It's made from white lead. Yes, actual lead. You dip your fingers into the cool, creamy white substance. It smells faintly metallic, and it's thick, almost like chalk paste. You pat it on your cheeks, your forehead, your chin, the goal. Deathly pale, translucent, ethereal, basically. You want to look like a haunted porcelain doll who may or may not be anemic in your world. Tan skin equals labor, fieldwork, peasantry. The sun is for other people. You stay indoors, read poetry, and whiten your face until it glows like a full moon. That glow, by the way, is caused by the lead blocking your pores and triggering a slow and steady systemic collapse. But you don't know that yet. All you know is that your skin looks flawless, smooth, pale, and eerily perfect. Historians still debate how aware women were of the dangers. Some suggest they must have noticed the side effects: hair loss, tooth decay, and an unfortunate tendency to faint during dinner. Others argue it was like smoking in the 1950s. Everyone did it, and if you coughed up a lung, well, you just weren't doing it glamorously enough. You finish your application by dusting on a fine powder. Maybe it's crushed pearl, maybe it's finely sifted bone, maybe it's literally powdered arsenic. No joke. There were beauty recipes that called for it. You fan yourself and admire your reflection, pale and pure as a snowfield. Your lips are still bare though, and pale lips are out, very out. You'll fix that in a second. But first, you need to sit down. You're dizzy. Probably just excitement, or maybe the blood rushing away from your brain to escape the lead in your face. Hard to say. Still, you're stunning. And if you're thinking, surely they didn't keep using it once they knew it was toxic, well, the use of lead-based cosmetics continued for centuries. Elizabeth I of England, total cerus enthusiast. Some portraits show her face so white it looks like she was sculpted from chalk. Behind the scenes, she suffered from skin sores and suspected mercury poisoning, because guess what? Her removal cream also had mercury. It's like layering poison on top of poison and calling it contour. Let's also take a moment to appreciate how this entire routine took forever. There were no fluorescent vanity mirrors or ring lights. You probably did this by candlelight in a drafty room, using a metal hand mirror that warped your reflection just enough to make you question your nose size every morning. But hey, vanity waits for no one. And then there's the ultimate medieval flex dyeing, beautiful. Some records suggest noblewomen were buried in full makeup, their porcelain faces preserved as a final tribute to their elegance. or to ensure they didn't look like commoners in the afterlife, just in case the angels were judging you. Wake up a little groggy, but not because you had a wild night at the tavern, oh no. You're just feeling lightheaded from yesterday's beauty maintenance. Specifically, the part where someone drained a bit of your blood. For your complexion. Totally normal. Your maid arrives carrying a small bowl, a cloth, and the tool of the trade. A slim, curved lancet. It gleams faintly in the candlelight. It's not for fighting. It's not for healing. It's for beauty. Today's Todo. A strategic facial bloodletting. Yes, you're about to let a professional, or sometimes just your enthusiastic cousin open up a vein or two, near your temple or behind your ear. Don't worry, they'll only take a little. Just enough to get that ethereal paleness, that delicate translucence that says, I am aristocracy and may faint at any moment. They place a warm cloth on your neck to get things moving. You sit still, knowing that a slight twitch could result in an accidental haircut of your artery. But you've done this before. You're a pro. This isn't medical. Not really. You're not sick. At least, not yet. But the logic is solid by medieval standards. Blood was considered one of the four humors, and beauty was about balance. Too much blood. You get flushed, red-faced, maybe even emotionally unstable. What a concept. Letting some of it out was basically the medieval equivalent of a detox smoothie. Sometimes leeches are involved. Sometimes it's just a quick slice and drip. Sometimes it's applied right after you put on lead makeup, which is a vibe, honestly. Like, let's open a wound on my skin, and then apply poison. Flawless plan. You sit, trying not to look directly at the bowl filling with your own blood. Your maid hums softly. This is just another Tuesday afterward. A cool compress is pressed to your skin, and you're rewarded with that fashionable post-bloodletting look. Pale, a little sunken, possibly weak. In other words, you look great. Here's the weird part. This wasn't just for women. Men sometimes did it too, especially if they were trying to soften their features or appear more poetic. Pale skin was not just feminine, it was noble. And if you're wondering, did people ever die from this? The answer is yes, absolutely. Infection, overbleeding, or just poor aim. But beauty was worth it. At least, that's what your culture tells you. After all, there were no selfies, no ring lights, just rumors, portraits, and what people said about your glow at the feast. And there's a catch. The paler you are, the more you have to keep it up. If you let yourself flush too often, say, bye, laughing too much, or walking briskly, you ruin the effect. So now you have to be careful, not just in skincare, but in emoting. Love that for you. Historians are still debating whether this practice was purely aesthetic or tangled up with medieval medicine. Some sources describe it as part of mood regulation, that too much blood might make a woman too passionate, too headstrong. So really, this wasn't just about pale skin. It was about compliance. Because nothing says I'm a demure, respectable lady like regular, controlled bleeding. You know, for your health, you stand up, a little shaky but radiant. Today, you've done your duty to beauty, to fashion, and to the system that taught you it's totally fine to drip a little for the sake of glow. You sit in front of the mirror again, but this time it's not about your skin, it's your eyebrows, or rather, the lack thereof, because in your world, having eyebrows is kind of low class. It's the 15th century, and the ideal woman looks like a celestial being. Smooth forehead, high dome of intelligence, Nothing getting in the way of her divine symmetry, and that includes those furry caterpillars above your eyes. They've got to go. You pick up your tools, a small, curved blade and a jar of vinegar, maybe a little walnut oil. Some women even use quicklime paste. Yes, the same stuff used to break down corpses can also gently dissolve your brow hairs. It burns a bit. Okay, more than a bit, but pain is fleeting. Bald elegance is forever. You begin plucking, one hair at a time. It stings, your eyes water, you sneeze. There's a story that if you sneeze while plucking, your soul tries to escape your body. You're not sure if that's true, but honestly, it feels accurate. The medieval high forehead is a status symbol, a sign of intellect and purity. Queens, do it. Noblewomen do it. It becomes so trendy that poets start praising the bright expanse of a woman's brow in their verses. A compliment in court might be something like, her forehead stretched nobly to heaven. You'd better believe that was hot. And it's not just your eyebrows. The hairline itself is suspiciously negotiable. You use that same blade to shave. Back your hairline, inch by inch, until it starts somewhere around the middle of your head. The effect, you look like a very elegant light bulb. But that's the aesthetic. There's no concept of a natural look here. If you showed up with full brows and a normal forehead, people might assume you're either a farm girl or recently cursed. Your friends are doing it, too. You attend a feast, and everyone's forehead is glowing under the candlelight like polished marble. Someone compliments your smooth dome. You feel proud, but you're also itchy. The plucked skin becomes irritated. You rub it discreetly. Redness sets in, but that's a small price to pay. Some women apply rose water to soothe the burn. Others just deal. Historians aren't sure whether infections from brow plucking were common, but given the hygiene standards, it's likely that many beauty routines ended with a quiet fever and a long nap. Interestingly, in other regions like parts of Asia during the same era, eyebrows were a beauty focus, even painted or reshaped with charcoal. But here, in medieval Europe, less is more. Or rather, none is more. You sometimes miss your eyebrows. They gave you expression, identity, emotion. Now your face is a blank canvas. People can't really tell when you're annoyed, or scared, or bored. Maybe that's the point. One day, you hear that someone in the village kept her eyebrows. She must be a witch, someone whispers. She has secrets she hides under those brows. You nod solemnly, not because you believe it, but because you remember beauty here isn't just about looks. It's about control and conformity, and knowing your place on the blank, pale ladder of society. Your reflection stares back at you, wide forehead, empty brow, ridge, high cheekbones. You look floating, like someone plucked straight from a stained glass window. You don't know if you like it, but you do know this. If someone sees a shadow of a hair growing back tomorrow, you'll be right back here, blade in hand. Today's the feast day of Saint Apollonia, and you've been invited to dine with several noble families. You've got the lead paste on your face, your eyebrows have been dutifully removed, and your hairline sits somewhere suspiciously near your crown. But something's missing. You squint into your polished copper mirror. Your skin is pale, yes, but is it convincingly pale? The kind of pale that whispers, this woman has never worked a day in her life. And maybe also, she might faint if you look at her too directly. Then you remember the finishing touch. You dip a tiny brush into a pot of blue. It's made of powdered azurite, crushed glass, or maybe lapis lazuli if you're lucky. Imported, expensive. Or, if you're less lucky, it's just a suspicious combination of copper salts and something vaguely sparkly from the apothecary. No one really knows what's in these beauty concoctions. They just know it makes you look like you've never seen the sun. You lean in and begin the delicate process of painting veins onto your face. Yes, veins, thin, winding, almost invisible blue lines curling gently around your temples, across your forehead, maybe even dipping down one cheek. The goal is to mimic what your skin might look like if it was so thin, so luminous, that your very bloodline could be seen through it. You're not trying to look healthy, you're trying to look fragile, glass-like, like royalty caught halfway between life and porcelain sculpture. You glance at your work. It's subtle but effective. A few extra strokes, and you look like someone whose diet consists entirely of almonds, poetry and sighs. Your maid compliments your artistry. You look like moonlight, she says. You smile. You'll probably have a headache by mid from the lead paste reacting with the paint. But that's tomorrow's problem. Now, this trend isn't everywhere. It's particularly popular in certain courts in parts of Italy and France, where the aesthetic has leaned hard into languid angel of divine birth. But even in places where vein painting isn't widespread, the underlying idea is the same. Beauty equals delicacy. Visibility of veins equals purity of blood. Which is ironic, considering the cosmetic cocktail on your face could probably kill a small bird on contact. Historians debate how often this was done. Some think it was common among upper-class women before major events, while others argue it was more of a symbolic ideal, perhaps exaggerated in artwork rather than real life. But there are enough references in beauty manuals and household records to suggest that yes, some women really did paint their veins on purpose. One Italian courtier supposedly had a servant dedicated solely to maintaining her blue work. That's a job title, vein detail assistant. You try to imagine your modern self walking into a Sephora and saying, "Do you have anything in visible vein?" But back then, it made perfect sense. The closer you looked to an illuminated manuscript angel, the better. There's even talk of using actual crushed beetle shells mixed with oils to create a shimmer effect over the painted veins. Like dew on a spider's web, one poet writes. You're not sure you want to look like an insect trap, but hey, it's poetic, of course. You can't sweat, or laugh too hard, or let a candle get too close to your face. One wrong move, and your whole carefully painted vascular system might smudge off into your soup, so you adopt the practiced stillness of noblewomen everywhere. Smile just slightly, nod with poise. Don't move your forehead too much, you paid good money to not have expression there. And when the Duke glances at you across the table, he sees what you want him to see: elegance, fragility, mystery. Meanwhile, you feel your makeup slowly hardening. If you blink too fast, your cheek might crack. But you look fantastic. You're brushing your hair again, slowly, like a ritual. 100 strokes every morning, 100 at night. It's long, longer than your arm span, heavier than it looks, and soft from the rosemary oil your maid makes by boiling herbs over the hearth. When it catches the candlelight just right, it shimmers like the wings of a saint in a stained glass window. But no one outside your home will ever see it, because in your world, beautiful hair is something to hide. You're married now, which means your hair has officially been promoted from public adornment to private treasure. The church and the culture around you agree. A respectable woman's hair should never be seen outside the walls of her home. To let it down in public would be as scandalous as walking outside in your shift. Maybe worse, so you begin the process of wrapping. First, you part your hair neatly down the middle. Symmetry is important. Then you twist it into coils or braids. Depending on the fashion of your region, you tuck it under a linen coif, a snug little cap tied beneath the chin. Over that goes a veil, sometimes silk, sometimes wool, sometimes sheer like breath, sometimes so thick you couldn't find your scalp with a map and compass. And if you're a noble woman attending court, you might top it off with a crespine, a decorative mesh hairnet often adorned with pearls, gold thread, or even little bits of bone. Yes, bone. Fashion is nothing if not full of surprises. By the time you're done, your hair is more fortress than feature. Your head feels heavy. You nod once to test the balance. It holds. You step outside and see your neighbor, also married, also veiled. You exchange the barest of nods. No one shows hair. Not unless they're widowed, insane, or scandalous, and even then, not on purpose. It hasn't always been like this. You remember when you were a girl, hair flying wild behind you as you raced through the orchard, no coif in sight. Back then, people smiled and said, "What lovely hair. You'll make a fine wife one day." And now, that hair is locked away. The very thing that once made you beautiful is now hidden like a holy relic. The reasoning, of course, is modesty. The hair of a woman is a net for the soul of a man, says one monk. You roll your eyes inwardly. How is that your fault? You're just trying to go to church without accidentally seducing a knight. But beneath the layers of symbolism, there's something else. Hair represents power, freedom, even danger. There are stories of women using their loose hair to cast spells, to lure men into forests, to curse entire villages. Loose hair is wild, untamed, and in your society, that's a little too close to chaos. So you keep it braided, tied, hidden. There are entire books about how to cover your hair correctly. One even suggests that the more layers between your locks and the eyes of strangers, the holier you are. You wonder, sometimes, if it's really about religion, just another way to turn beauty inward, to make it a secret, a thing that only belongs to others when they've earned it. And yet, behind closed doors, hair becomes everything. Again, your husband sometimes watches you undo the veil, the coif, the pins. It's a slow unraveling, like peeling back layers of identity. By the time your hair falls loose around your shoulders, you're no longer the modest wife at mass. You're something closer to yourself at night. You sleep with your hair in braids to keep it from tangling. Sometimes you dream of running again, barefoot, hair streaming behind you like fire, wind tugging at your veil until it slips away entirely. You always wake up before it falls. You're sitting in a sunbeam, not for leisure, not for a nap. You're working on your hair. Specifically, you're baking it. Today's goal is golden, not metaphorically. You want your hair to shimmer like summer wheat, like saintly halos, like the very notion of purity made tangible. Because in your world, golden hair isn't just pretty, it's divine. The problem, you were born brunette, but that's a temporary inconvenience. You've got a homemade bleach recipe, passed down from your cousin who swears it worked wonders on her sister's mouse brown curls. The ingredients? Well, let's just say the science is medieval at best. You mix together quicklime, wood ash, alum, and a few drops of goat urine. Yes, urine. Fermented, ideally. Warmed slightly for best results. Some women prefer horse urine. Something about the acidity but goats, what you've got today. You smear the resulting paste onto your hair, taking care to avoid your scalp. You've made that mistake before. Then you cover it with a wide-brimmed bonnet, one that has a circle cut out at the top. It looks like something a pastry chef might wear to make medieval croissants. Through the top hole, your damp, goopy hair flops out, exposed to the sun like a sacrificial offering. And now you wait for hours. Just sit in the heat with urine. On your head, you hum softly, maybe nibble on some figs. A bee buzzes near you and immediately regrets it. Other women are doing the same. In fact, there's an entire courtyard full of golden hair hopefuls like you. Heads poking through weird sun hats like bizarre mushrooms sprouting in synchronized fashion. You glance at the girl beside you. Her bonnet has lace trim. Fancy. This isn't just a fashion trend, it's spiritual. There are paintings of the Virgin Mary with golden hair, even though she probably didn't look remotely like a Florentine noblewoman. But artists aren't interested in historical accuracy. They're crafting ideals, and you, in turn, are crafting yourself to match them, because blonde hair means youth, innocence, heavenly favor, and yes, sometimes scandal. There's a rumor that the more adventurous women of Venice also bleach their hair, so men never quite know whether the golden locks belong to a saint or a courtesan. Either way, they stare. Historians still argue whether these treatments actually worked. Some say yes, especially after repeated exposure and scorching Mediterranean sun. Others believe the hair simply lightened a few shades and was then powdered or painted to appear more golden in dim candlelight. You're on week 3 of the process and definitely noticing a change there. Your ends feel like straw, and once a chunk broke off entirely. Small price to pay. When the sun finally dips low, you rinse the mixture out in a basin of rose water and vinegar. Your hair smells like a complicated soup, but it glows faintly just enough to catch the eye at the evening feast. Someone compliments you. Have you been touched by angels? They ask. You smile modestly and pretend not to notice the faint sizzling sensation at your scalp in private. You run your fingers through your dry, crunchy curls and whisper a small prayer. For shine, for volume, for the preservation of your hairline, because tomorrow you're doing it all again. You're already pale, your veins are delicately painted, and your hair frankly deserves its own choir of angels. But you glance in the mirror and something's missing. Ah, yes, colored. Not too much, of course. Just a whisper, a flush, a barely. There's suggestion that maybe, just maybe, you once saw a strawberry from across the market square and blushed. You reach for your rouge. Today's mixture is a luxurious red, rich and earthy. It took your maid 3 hours to grind the ingredients. A little cinnabar here, a bit of crushed cochineal beetles there. Add a touch of vinegar to make it spread easier, and if you're particularly daring, a sprinkle of powdered sulfur to activate the hue. You dab it onto your cheeks using a piece of cloth or your ring finger. Careful not to blend too much. You're not going for realism. You're going for romance novel fevers. You want to look like a woman who just heard a night read poetry, or possibly someone recovering from a very polite case of tuberculosis. The effect is immediate. Your reflection blooms. That little pop of red transforms your entire face. Suddenly, you look alert, flushed, slightly mischievous. Also, possibly dying, because what you're rubbing into your cheeks daily is, in some cases, laced with mercury, lead, or both. Not on purpose, necessarily, but in a time before safety regulations and ingredient lists Rouge was whatever the seller said it was. And if it looked fabulous, who were you to ask questions? There's a rumor that a duchess in Burgundy dropped dead mid-feast. Heart failure, they said. Or maybe a stroke. But her chambermaid swears it was the Rouge. Too much sulfur. Too much. Cinnabar, too little testing. You apply a matching tint to your lips, crushed iron oxide mixed with beeswax, and if you're particularly fashionable, a smidge of rust scraped from an old sword. That warrior's kiss tone is really in this year. You've also heard that some women use a mixture of red wine and egg yolk for a natural gloss. You tried that once. It dripped. Never again now. You press your lips together and examine the finished product. You look warm, alive, touched by vitality. It's an illusion, of course. You haven't eaten more than a soft fig and a crust of bread in 2 days. But that's part of the charm. Beauty shouldn't be real. It should be aspirational. Historians still debate whether medieval makeup was used openly or kept private. Some records suggest women applied it before guests arrived, then denied it. Outright, like a noble version of "I woke up like this." Others point to paintings and poetry where rosy cheeks are praised. So often it's clear people knew the color didn't come naturally. There were even natural rouge alternatives. Beetroot juice, for instance. But it faded quickly. And if you were sitting at court for hours under layers of fabric, you needed something with staying power. Even if that staying power came from elements on the periodic table that also appear. In warning labels, you touch up the edges, then tilt your head. Perfect. The illusion of health, the suggestion of youth, the faint glow of a woman who might be in love, or might be slowly absorbing toxins through her pores. Hard to tell, either way. The duke across the table won't stop staring. You're dressed, powdered, painted, and sculpted into perfection. But as you walk across the hall, something stops you. Not physically, olfactorily. A faint something. Is that goat? Or is it you? You freeze, because you haven't bathed in 11 days. Not because you're lazy. Quite the opposite. In your time, water is suspicious. Medical scholars, those learned men with ink-stained fingers and very strong opinions, have warned everyone that water opens the pores. And open pores are vulnerable to illness, to demons, to breezes. So, instead of washing, you perfume. You reach for your pomander, a little metal orb that hangs from your belt like a medieval AirPod case. Inside, a tightly packed ball of herbs, spices, resins, and waxes. It smells like clove, frankincense, dried roses, and sometimes just panic. You give it a shake and walk faster, hoping the scent disperses strategically. Still not enough. Time to powder. You call for your maid, who brings a box of body powder made from crushed iris root, orris, and sometimes finely milled other things. One recipe from a noblewoman's diary includes ground bone and dried cat feces, soaked in rose water and dried in the sun. She claimed it made her smell like the Virgin's smile. You apply it under your arms, behind your knees, between your toes, anywhere you think might bloom. The smell improves, if only temporarily. But now your skin itches. The powder's a bit coarse. You're not supposed to scratch. It ruins the illusion of gentle nobility. But oh, it burns. If you're especially wealthy, you might have access to scented gloves. You slide your hands into soft leather lined with a mixture of musk and ambergris. Ambergris, by the way, is whale vomit. Well, technically, whale intestinal secretion. Rare, costly, allegedly divine. You hold your hands to your face and inhale bliss. Sometimes you tuck dried lavender into your bodice. sometimes rosemary, sometimes little sachets filled with whatever your local apothecary claims is aromatic. One time, you ended up with powdered garlic. You wore it all day, thinking it was imported myrrh. At social events, everyone is doing the same. Perfumed pouches under sleeves, herb bundles tied to corset strings, chunks of incense in tiny boxes pinned to gowns. You pass another woman and catch the scent of myrtle mixed with something unidentifiable. You nod politely. She nods back. You're both trying your best. Historians argue about just how foul things really were. Some say people got used to it, that the human nose adapts. Others think the stench was overpowering and only masked by sheer layers of olfactory warfare. One 14th century physician wrote that a well-scented lady is a fortress no illness dares enter. You're not sure if that's science or poetry. Either way, it's a battle. Of course, there are actual perfumes too, oil-based, alcohol-based, flower-infused, but they're expensive and volatile, and sometimes made with ingredients that will stain your skin green. So the natural route, while riskier in aroma, is safer for your complexion. You make a mental note to dry more rose petals tomorrow. At night, before bed, you sprinkle crushed clove onto your pillow and rub a lemon peel behind your ears. You smell complicated, but not unwashed. That's the line you aim for. You drift off wondering what people in the future will think of your perfume routine. They'll say you were weird. You know that already, but at least you never smelled like a peasant. You're almost ready for the ball. The candles have been lit, the music's warming up, and your sleeves are so wide they could catch pigeons if you lifted your arms too quickly. You've powdered, veiled, painted your veins, and your cheeks. Have that gentle, dying, but lovely hue. But now it's time for the final detail. Your lips. In a world where your entire face is designed to look like you're halfway to becoming a ghost, your lips are your rebellion. They're allowed to be red. Not too red, mind you. You're a lady, not a harlot. But just red enough to suggest mystery, sorrow, possibly romance, possibly arsenic. Hard to tell. You reach for your lip color. Today's batch is especially rich, brick red with a hint of plum. The recipe came from a friend's cousin's apothecary, and while she says it's all natural, the ingredients read like the early stages of an alchemical experiment. There's red ochre earthy and mineral, crushed cochineal beetles, imported from distant lands, rose petals, boiled down to a syrup, but also iron oxide, vinegar, and the star of today's pigment, rust. Yes, real rust. Scraped from an old plough, dried in the sun, ground to a powder, and mixed with alum and animal fat to make it stick. It's called the blood of Mars, and it's fashionable this season. You apply it with a small stick. No brushes yet, just fingers or twigs wrapped in linen. It tastes faintly metallic, like the handle of a sword. You try not to lick your lips. That's considered unladylike, also dangerous. One too many noblewomen have been found with swollen tongues after biting into their beauty by accident. Some women swear by cinnabar-based lip tints, a beautiful, deep red that glows in candlelight. But cinnabar is mercury sulfide, so while your lips might glisten like rubies, your nervous system quietly files a complaint. There's even a rumor that one noble woman had a special night lipstick made with bat blood and coral dust. Supposedly, it made her dreams more romantic. More likely, it made her wake up with a rash. You choose not to ask too many questions. Tonight, you're aiming for the wilted rose effect. The kind of lips that look like you just whispered a secret. or like you've been up all night writing poetry by moonlight. There's a method, a darker tint near the corners, lighter in the middle, like your mouth is gently blooming or bruising. You smile at your reflection. It's soft, haunting. You look like someone who might recite tragic verses and then vanish into a convent. There's a lot of poetry about lips in your world. Lips like blood, lips like cherries, lips that lead men astray. A bard once wrote that a woman's lips were a wound one wished to fall into. He meant it as a compliment. You think about that as you press a final touch of pigment onto your lower lip, letting it bleed slightly into the skin. Some scholars argue that lip color wasn't always worn openly. Church leaders condemned painted mouths as a sign of vanity or worse, witchcraft. A woman caught with too bright lips might be accused of trying to enchant someone. Not metaphorically actually enchant them. Magic through makeup. But then again, some queens wore lipstick so boldly that portraits had to be adjusted. Elizabeth of York, Isabeau of Bavaria. They knew how to work a red mouth, and so do you. As you walk into the ballroom, every head turns. Not for your dress, not even for your shimmering veil, but for the soft curve of your lips like a promise, or a warning drawn in rust. And maybe, just maybe, they wonder what you've kissed to make them glow like that. You'll never tell. You blink twice. It stings. Perfect. Your cheeks are flushed. Your lips rust-inged and tragic, and your veil is arranged to perfection. But none of it matters if your eyes don't tell the story. The eyes are everything. Windows to the soul, as the poets say, and in your case, possibly also to a mild chemical burn. Because here's the truth. In your world, a proper lady's eyes should not be merely open. They should shimmer, glisten, smolder like damp embers. The kind of look that makes a knight forget his own name or start writing sonnets to your eyebrow arch. And the best way to get that irritation? You reach for your eye potion, kept in a tiny bone vial. It's a local recipe, a touch of belladonna, a dash of iris root juice, and just enough clove oil to make your tear ducts start whispering regrets. If you're feeling particularly daring, there's always dried smoke ash mixed with rose water, popular among actors and court musicians, or anyone trying to look artistically undone. You tip your head back and let a single drop fall into each eye. The burn is immediate, not agony, just a sharpness, like your eyeballs have opinions. You blink again, and tears spring up naturally, tracing faint lines down your powdered cheeks. You don't wipe them. They're part of the look. You glance in the mirror. Your eyes are now pink-rimmed, glistening, impossibly soft, like you've just read a very emotional poem or witnessed something devastatingly beautiful. Say, a falcon learning to love again. Your maid nods in approval. You look like sorrow incarnate, she says, in the good way. And it is good, because puffy, red, watery eyes suggest passion, sensitivity, a delicate constitution, all extremely valuable traits in a marriage market where the most desired woman is the one most likely to faint while reading scripture. Of course, there are risks. Belladonna, for one, is famously poisonous. It dilates the pupils, making your eyes appear larger and darker, a striking effect, especially by candlelight. But over time, it can cause blurred vision, permanent damage, or what one Italian noblewoman described as seeing angels where there are only pigeons. She meant it romantically, mostly. Then there's the method used by some particularly determined ladies. Smoke, exposure, You light a tiny twig of burning resin, maybe myrrh or pine, and hold your face near it, letting the smoke curl into your eyes. You blink furiously. You cough. You tear up. And now you've got the look. Historians argue about whether this was universal. Some believe only the upper classes could afford these eye enhancers, while others suggest even rural women might have used herbs or soot to achieve a similar glow. In paintings from the period, women's eyes are often slightly red-dinged, gazing off into the distance like they've just heard a tragic lullaby. And of course, there's the whisper of magic again. Red eyes, weeping women, herbs with names like Devil's Charm or Lover's Dust. Some clerics claimed this was evidence of witchcraft, or at the very least, moral slipperiness. No true woman needs false sorrow, wrote one priest. He clearly had never been to a royal banquet. You know better. Tonight, your eyes will shimmer beneath your veil. Men will lean forward, trying to read the secrets behind your glassy stare. Women will pretend not to notice, but take mental notes. You'll say little, maybe sigh once, at the right moment. You'll look like you're about to cry, but you won't, because that would ruin the powder. You're sipping watered-down wine from a pewter goblet, holding it just so tilted at the perfect angle, fingertips delicate, posture queenly. Everything is perfect, until you remember your smile. You gently press your tongue against your front teeth, still black. Good in your time and place. A gleaming white smile means one of two things. You're either very young, or you've been chewing bones out back with the kitchen staff. White teeth, that's a peasant flex. But black teeth? Ah, now that's elegance. Why? Because in some corners of the medieval world, particularly in parts of Japan, China, and later even trickling into elite European circles, darkened teeth came to symbolize refinement, maturity, and most importantly, marriage. Black teeth meant you were off the market, a respectable woman, someone who had completed her transformation from innocent maiden to dignified wife. You reach for your tooth lacquering kit. It's in a little box, carved from bone, tucked discreetly under your dressing table. Inside, iron filings soaked in vinegar, ground gallnut, and maybe a splash of tea. The mixture smells like rust and forest floor. You take the brush, more of a stick, really, and carefully paint your front teeth, top and bottom. You've done this dozens of times, but it still tingles and tastes questionable. You hold your mouth open for a few seconds, letting it dry. No one told you elegance would taste like you've been licking iron gates, but it's worth it, because tonight, when you laugh softly at some minor lord's terrible joke, your black teeth will glimmer like polished obsidian in the candlelight. He'll pause. He'll notice. He won't flirt again. Success. Historians still debate where this trend truly began. In Japan's Heian period, the practice of ohagro, blackening the teeth, was widespread among aristocratic women. It protected the teeth, allegedly, helped prevent decay, but more importantly, it separated the women from the girls. It said, I belong to someone. And also, I'm terrifyingly elegant. Some European noblewomen, ever curious about Eastern fashion, began experimenting with similar styles, especially those who fancied themselves cosmopolitan. Most didn't go for a mouse, maybe just the front teeth, just enough to look interesting, exotic, married, and occasionally just intimidating. You glance at the younger girls at the feast. They giggle with white teeth showing, fresh, bright, apple-bitten teeth. The men lean toward them like moths to flame. But you lean back, lips parted just slightly. When you smile, it's shadow, and mystery. A smile that suggests you've seen too much, know too much, and possibly have poison hidden in your sleeve. You've heard some whisper that the black tooth fashion is strange. Why would anyone want to look like their teeth are rotting? Someone once muttered, behind a fan, but they don't understand. This isn't about rotting, it's about arrival. You've crossed the threshold from youth into power. Your hair is veiled, your cheeks are red, your lips rusted, and your eyes glimmer like you've just watched a village burn in an elegant way, of course. Your teeth are just the final punctuation mark saying what you won't. You sip your wine again, carefully. No smudging, and when the bard begins to sing, you smile just enough to let him see the faint shimmer of black. He stumbles over a lyric. Perfect. You sit by the window, embroidery hoop in hand, silk thread snaking through your fingers. Outside, you hear the clatter of carts, the scrape of broom. Against cobblestone, the voices of the butcher's daughters laughing with raw hands. But your hands are above all that, because in your world, beauty doesn't end at the face. It extends to the fingertips. Your fingers are long and pale, with nails carefully shaped into a subtle almond curve. No dirt, no rough skin, no evidence that you've ever chopped a root vegetable or, heaven forbid, picked up something heavier than a pearl-handled hairbrush. Your palms are soft, your knuckles barely creased, and that's on purpose. You wear gloves, always, indoors, outdoors, while traveling, while sipping broth, sometimes even while sleeping, with linen gloves soaked in rosewater and egg white to keep the skin supple. The goal, a hand that looks like it has never grasped, only gestured, that has never labored, only lingered today. Your maid brings out a new pair, soft kid leather, dusted inside with violet powder. You slip them on slowly. They fit like a second skin. They smell like crushed flowers and faint vanity. There's a rumor that one noblewoman had her gloves lined with swan fat to keep her hands moist through the winter. Another allegedly bathed her hands in goat's milk, with slices of cucumber and whispers of gold leaf floating on top. Is it effective? No one knows. But it feels elegant. Meanwhile, your fingernails are buffed with a smooth piece of Mother Rouge. Not painted. Painted nails are associated with performers, or worse, healers. But a natural sheen. Acceptable, encouraged. It says, I was born this luminous, but beauty goes beyond appearance. There's an entire etiquette around hand movements. You're trained to hold objects delicately, never gripping, always cradling. Your gestures are slow, fluid. You never point. That's what servants do. You indicate, vaguely. If someone doesn't understand, that's their problem. At court, the way you hold your goblet matters. Your fingers should arc gracefully. Your pinky should hover like it's allergic to effort. Dropping something in public is a catastrophe, not because of the object, but because bending down would reveal your working spine. Scandalous. Historians believe this hand obsession wasn't just about vanity. It was a symbol of class warfare in miniature. In a world where 90% of people worked with their hands, digging, cooking, spinning, hauling, having useless hands was the ultimate flex. It meant you had people to do those things for you. Some portraits of noble women show their hands placed stiffly over their laps, fingers barely curled, nails faintly gleaming, almost unnatural in their stillness, as if even movement might wrinkle the illusion. You once heard of a girl, young, ambitious, not yet married, who practiced stillness for hours a day, sitting motionless in front of a mirror, fingers curved, like ivory spoons, trying to train her hands into nobility. She married well, eventually. No one ever saw her crack her knuckles. You, too, have learned the discipline. At dinner, you use 3 fingers to pluck grapes from a plate. You pass notes. With a gloved hand, always sealed with wax and delicacy. You wave like you're brushing away mist. When someone comments on the whiteness of your skin, you smile politely and do not say, "It's because I haven't touched anything sharp in months." But the truth is, your hands are a costume, a performance of softness. They know embroidery, yes, but also the weight of expectation. They know how to tremble gracefully when startled, how to rest like lilies upon your lap, how to endure stillness and make it look like peace. And when your gloves come off at night, you hold them up to the candlelight and whisper the same silent hope every noblewoman does. Let them still look untouched. You take a deep breath, then exhale into your palm. It smells fine, mostly, but is fine good enough? Not when tonight you'll be seated beside a bishop's nephew and a merchant's daughter, with scandalous opinions about whose dowry included actual land and whose only included somewhat charming dimples. You reach for your secret weapon, a tiny pearl-inlaid box that fits in the palm of your hand. Inside, nestled like treasure, are 3 tiny spheres, shiny, fragrant, and slightly suspicious. You select one and pop it gently into your mouth. It tastes like myrrh and orange peel and maybe chalk. Definitely something bitter. Definitely something not entirely food, because this isn't candy. It's a breath pearl, also known as a musk ball or aromatic lozenge, designed not to be chewed or swallowed, but rolled gently around your tongue like a precious stone till your breath carries. Just the faintest whisper of expensive mystery. The ingredients are a closely guarded secret, but you've heard rumors. Powdered clove, honeyed resin, cinnamon bark, dried mint, sugar syrup, and allegedly the gall of deer, or crushed pearls, or beaver glands. Depending on the region and the recipe, breath balls range from the delightfully herbal to the vaguely demonic. One lady at court insists hers contain powdered unicorn horn. Another swears by a blend soaked in wine for 7 nights beneath a full moon. You once tried one of those. It made your gums tingle for hours. Not in a good way, still. The point is simple. Your breath should never betray you. In a world where bathing is rare, and dental hygiene consists of chewing mint twigs and whispering prayers, breath becomes a social weapon. A woman with sweet breath is assumed to be pure, clean, possibly divine. A woman with unpleasant breath, dangerous, unruly, possibly cursed. You swirl the sphere in your mouth, letting its perfume coat your tongue. You imagine speaking to someone important, maybe a baron, maybe a poet. You lean in slightly. He catches a hint of cardamom and rose oil. His eyebrows lift. You smile, barely it's working. Some women go further. They chew on lavender stalks or anise seeds. They press orange peels against the roof of their mouths. They gargle with wine mixed with salt and dried violets. A few even dab perfume directly onto their tongues, despite stern warnings from healers that this will dry the spirit and roast the blood. You ignore them. Your blood feels you in a roasted. Tonight, you're confident. You've done the rituals. You've flossed with horsehair. You've rinsed with fennel water. You even dabbed a bit of clove oil behind each ear just in case proximity creates confusion. Historians still puzzle over how common this breath obsession was. Some believe it was mostly confined to the elite, who could afford the spices and sweeteners. Others argue even modest households kept a jar of mouth drops by the hearth, passed around like sacred peppermints before Sunday service. There's even one recorded case of a noblewoman fainting net from tight lacing or politics. But because she swallowed for musk balls in a row to impress a bishop. She reportedly said, before slipping off her chair, "If he remembers my words, let him remember their scent." Power move. You lean back and let your breath mingle with the air. Sweet, complex, slightly spicy. The merchant's daughter sits beside you, talking too loudly. Her breath smells like onions and anxiety. You tilt your face away with polite elegance. She'll learn you tuck another breath ball into your cheek, just for insurance. And as you smile at the bishop's nephew across the table, you know whatever you say tonight, it will land gently, sweetly, elegantly, and very, very fragrantly. You sit by the hearth, inspecting a tiny jar carved from polished horn. It's cold to the touch and sealed tight with a waxy plug. No label, of course, just a red ribbon tied around its neck, which is either decorativia, a warning, inside. Your eyeliner, yes. Eyeliner, not the sleek, smudge-proof pen of the future, but a gritty paste made from crushed antimony, soot, maybe a dash of egg yolk or fig sap. If your supplier is particularly daring, it might also include traces of arsenic or powdered nightshade. You dip the corner of a feather into it, tilt your head back, and drag the black line gently across your lower lid. It burns, only a little, but oh, what a look. Your eyes suddenly seem deeper, more knowing. The line exaggerates their almond shape, elongates them into something otherworldly, dangerous but delicate, like a painting that might blink if the room gets too quiet. You dab the other eye, no mirror needed. You've done this enough to feel it in your bones. Some say this look comes from the East brought back by travelers, merchants, crusaders with tired eyes and tales of veiled women whose gaze could pierce armor. Others say it's older, that even the Egyptians used kohl for the same purpose, for beauty, for mysticism, for protection. You like the idea that your eyeliner is more than cosmetic, a shield, a spell, a subtle rebellion smudged along your lash line, but not everyone sees it that way. Your priest disapproves. Black-rimmed eyes are foresaid actresses, he once muttered during confession, avoiding eye contact, and witches. You nodded solemnly, then reapplied your eyeliner before Vespers, just to make a point. You've heard the rumors, of course, that some women keep secret mixtures in their cosmetic kitsnat, just for beauty, but for persuasion. A pinch of mandrake in the rouge to stir longing. A breath of henbane in the perfume to blur judgment. A touch of powdered toadstool in the lip balm for insurance. Did you ever see it done? No. Would you try it? Absolutely not. But you keep your jars tightly closed. Not because they're dangerous, but because people believe they might be. And that belief, that's power. Historians still debate how much witchcraft was real and how much was just women knowing how to mix things better than the local doctor. Some say women were burned for wearing makeup that worked too well, that if you walked into a room and people turned their heads, someone was bound to accuse you of something, and yet you persist. You crush your pigments carefully. You stir your pastes with a bone spoon. You whisper little rhymes as you blend your powders, not spells, really, just habits, but comforting. Tonight, you line your eyes not too heavily, just enough to suggest secrets, enough to hint that you might know more than you say, enough to make the other women at the banquet lean closer and say, "Where did you get that? Is it safe?" You'll smile faintly. Safe enough, you'll say. You'll never tell them it came from a midwife with cloudy eyes who swore by the phases of the moon, or that you store it wrapped in black cloth and lavender to keep it calm, or that once, when you wore it too thick, 3 men asked for your hand by morning. Coincidence? Surely you finished the last stroke. Blink. Once. Perfect. You don't need to say a word tonight. Your eyes will do all the talking. You cough once into your handkerchief. It comes back pink. Not enough to raise alarm. Not yet. Just a whisper of something beneath the surface. Something soft, fragile, like your body is trying to match the look you've worked so hard to create. You smile. Isn't that the point? You've done everything right. You've bleached your hair with sunlight and goat's urine. You've painted your veins blue and rimmed your eyes with burnt antimony. Your lips are red with rust. Your cheeks glisten with mercury-laced blush. Your teeth are black. Your breath is perfumed. And your hands, silken, soft, unspoiled. And now you're tired. Not in the dramatic fainting couch way you've performed at banquets. This is different, deeper, more like your bones are quietly asking for a break. Your maid helps you out of your layers. Veil, coif, overskirt, chemise, underbodice, gloves. You sink into the mattress like a petal pressed between the pages of a book. She places a cloth over your forehead. You close your eyes. Everything itches. Your skin is tired of the paint, the paste, the scraping, the sealing. Your pores have forgotten what air feels like. Your lashes clump slightly with last week's eyeliner, and your eyebrows have stopped trying to grow back. But you are radiant, at least. Everyone says so. You're frequently described in terms of glow, of paleness, of symmetry. People speak of you in pastels. In size, she's like moonlight, they say. She looks like she's not quite real. And they're right, because the beauty you've built isn't quite real. It's ritual. A slow sacrifice performed in front of a mirror. Day after day, layer after layer, until you've constructed an entire self that can walk, speak, dine, marry and dissolve. You remember the girls you once knew, the ones who painted too much, laughed too hard, stayed up late. They faded quickly. People said it was illness, or a weak heart, or scandal, but no one ever blamed the lead. The sulfur, the ash, the endless pressure to float above life instead of living it. Historians today still debate this ending. Did medieval beauty standards kill women, or were they simply echoing the fragility of the world around them? Was it fashion, or was it fear of age of desire, of losing place and privilege in a world that defined worth by skin tone and how still you could sit? You don't know. All you know is that you've spent years building this version of yourself, this glimmering, untouchable ghost of a woman. And now, as the cough deepens, as your lips lose their lustrous sheen, as your skin turns from alabaster to wax, you begin to understand. You were never meant to last. That was the most beautiful part. And now your eyes begin to close, not like a curtain falling, but like candlelight dimming behind sheer silk. You're still in that distant, flickering world of perfumed powders and shadowed hallways, where beauty whispered louder than words and every mirror held a secret. You've wandered through a time where paint was power, where elegance came with a cost, and where every graceful gesture hid the quiet hum of effort beneath. You saw what it meant to be beautiful, not effortless, but effort made invisible. Not alive, but admired. Not full, but flawless. And now you can let it go. The rough lips, the powdered skin, the bitter perfume pearls, All of it dissolves like a dream pressed into lace. You don't need to hold your breath anymore. You don't need to paint your sorrow on your face to make it count. Tonight, no one's watching, no one's measuring, no one's expecting you to sparkle. Only rest remains, so let your hands relax. Let your brow soften, let the imagined veil slip from your hair and float gently to the floor. Breathe in, quiet and slow. You are not a portrait. You are not a poem. You are just here, now, drifting, because beauty is fleeting. But soft, honest kind of sleepies, something eternal. And you, dear listener, have earned it.